So guys, picking up where we left off with the review of the Cold Steel Trail Boss, I actually wanted to do a video comparing expensive axes versus budget axes. And in this particular video, I'm not going to be talking about axes that, like axe heads you can buy in our store, because I have a few of those and you can get really nice axe heads to buy in our store. But if you actually add up the cost of buying and restoring an axe head, it actually ends up being about the same as just buying a Wetterlings, because all this tools you have to buy, it actually could even be more, depending if you get power tools, it can actually be even more to restore an axe head, as opposed to just buying a Wetterlings or buying a GBA. So I'm not going to necessarily count that, because adding in all the additional costs of restoring a $20 axe head, you're actually really looking at the price of it. So now onto what you can actually buy as an axe. And we're going to be talking about the inexpensive Cold Steel Trail Boss on the left, and on the right is going to be the GBA Scandi Forest axe. These two are not necessarily exact in head weight or handle length, but they are very close, and I figure these two represent expensive and inexpensive very well. So starting off, one of the most notable features about an inexpensive axe is the lack of refinement in the handle. Just being compared to this GBA, you'll automatically notice that the lack of refinement is very obvious. You can see that there's much more ergonomics to this. There's actually a slight S shape in the GBA handle, whereas this one here, it is extremely straight. It has a slight swell, and overall it's actually very round, whereas this is actually quite ovular. This handle is actually quite ovular, and there's a lot of wood taken off from these two sides, so that you really can surround, your entire hand can surround the axe handle, as you guys can see there. Another thing you'll note that's very prevalent is in the fawn's foot. This fawn's foot, like I said, forming that S shape is actually curved outward, and so your hand wraps all the way around and really gets hooked in to the handle, whereas on this, you'll note it's very big and blocky. Hand doesn't actually, you guys can see there, completely touch, so it's not a completely full grip, and once again, there's not as much locking going on back behind the handle. So the next part would definitely be fitment. The fit on this is not quite as good. This is actually something that's particularly prone to the cold steel. You can actually see that the fitment where the axe head was originally is actually elevated about a ½ inch. So it's actually kind of bad. But you can see that there's nowhere near as good fitment, and this transition line right here is really bad. Truly, this axe looks like right and proper, it should have been fit right here. Generally, on a good axe fit, right at this large swell, I should pop this off so you can see where it swells. This axe head, technically without the ear, right around there, it's right there. It's very close to this swelling point where this meets and this comes up to just a general swell. So you can see not quite as good axe fitment on the less expensive axe, but that is kind of to be expected. One kind of blessing in disguise is that since this is actually smaller, it makes it really nice to hold there. You can actually get a really nice grip right there. So that's kind of a blessing in disguise, but not necessarily something that's positive. Now on to the actual axe head. So first off, I should note that this actually comes with a sheath. Most inexpensive axes do not come with sheaths. Actually, the Cold Steel just came with a plastic slip over it, like a clear plastic slip. You guys that have got tomahawks will know what I'm talking about. The tomahawks come with the same thing. But you'll note that this actually comes with a sheath. Most more expensive axes generally do, or rather a mask. These aren't necessarily sheaths. But you'll immediately note that this head is completely different. Could not be more different than this. This is painted over. Really, this feels mass produced. This just gives a complete look of not being hand produced one at a time. They look all extremely unique. You know, this looks extremely mass produced with its black paint and, you know, clear varnish over the actual blade, which is actually kind of worn on this one, but as it goes, you know, this looks extremely mass produced, but that's not necessarily a problem. That's primarily aesthetics. One thing you'll note is out of box sharpness. Expensive axes come very sharp. This out of box was shaving sharp. It still is. I keep it shaving sharp. And this one was actually as dull as a butter knife. You could not really hurt yourself with this axe unless you really swung it. It was extremely dull, and it had to immediately be sharpened. And this is something that you'll find not just in the Cold Steel Trail Boss, but actually in all inexpensive axes, including some that you buy to restore, is the out-of-box sharpness will be generally terrible. And like I said, this one was no exception to that. I mean, now it's good, but generally terrible with them. Something else you'll note is, while we're talking about the steel and cutting edge, you'll note that these two have very different steels. Generally, your higher up steels, or your higher up axes, will have 5160 bits inserted into the actual cutting edge, which will give them extremely long life. They'll stay sharper a lot longer and go a lot further. This is just straight 1055 carbon steel, which is not necessarily horrible, but it will lose its edge a lot faster, and you will have to make sure that you keep up with it. In addition, it's all carbon steel, so it can rust easier. The next thing we'll go to is getting back to refinement of the general axe head. When you look at this, it looks like a very clunky design. You'll note, like right here, this is kind of a weird transition where it's very abrupt here. It just does not look very well designed and thought out. I mean, it looks good enough to be an axe, but when you look at the design of the GBA, everything is round. There's no abrupt 90-degree angles. Everything is round, and everything is comfortable to the touch. There's no sharp edge. I mean, other than this one, there's no sharp edges. Just everything is comfortable to touch. You're not really going to hurt yourself on it other than the edge. Overall, the design looks a lot better, not only aesthetically, but when you're actually handling and using the axe. The design just pays. Generally, more of your higher axes, not all of them, but more of your higher up axes have ears on them, and ears, they're kind of a long forgotten tradition, and many axes have not had ears on them for a very long time. True Temper doesn't do it, or didn't do it back in the 50s, like I said, 60s. It's very long forgotten, except for more of these higher up axes. And the one reason you want ears is ears are essentially stabilizers. It's a part of making the ultimate fit of an axe head. Reduce the chance of lateral play in the axe head, so when it moves side to side, maybe that's not lateral, but it reduces the chance of the axe head actually moving side to side. Like this one, it has a slight amount of play side to side and back and forth, so having ears are an extra stabilizer, and once again that goes back to the design being more well thought out, and ultimately this will help your axe head. Ultimately this will help whatever axe handle you put on here, or including the axe handle that's on here right now. It will help them to stay on there longer and overall have a longer axe handle life, which is something that's quite important, especially when you spend several days. I mean, this isn't my axe handle, but having made axe handles in the past, it's nice to know that they'll last longer, because it can take several days up to a week to actually make a right and proper axe handle. So having ears is a really nice thing, and like I said, it kind of means that you're gonna have a longer life in your axe. Like I said, abrupt 90-degree angles and no ears, so that means it's not gonna, your handles are not gonna last as long on these. Also more vulnerable without ears and more prone to cracking. You guys will notice I put some Gorilla Glue there because this actually cracked there. This has several cracks in it, nothing severe, but it has several cracks, and you can tell that it is because the axe head has too much movement in it. So other than that, there aren't too many more big differentiators. I mean, there are little things like there's no lanyard in this, but not all expensive axes. I know some council tools especially do not come with lanyard holes drilled in them. GBA and Wetterlings do most of the time drill their handles out and actually countersink them for lanyards like this. This is something, if you care about your axe, I would highly recommend putting a lanyard on them, because I know several people in the bushcrafting community and up here, anywhere where you get a lot of snow, it's not as applicable for an axe this big, but can be. If you have several feet on the snow, the ground, and you drop your axe in that snow, or you set your axe down, of course this axe head is heavy, it's steel, it's heavier than the snow, so it will sink into the snow. And unfortunately, I know some people who have lost their axes and had to come back in the spring, and when they found their over $100 GBA, the axe head was extremely rusted. And the handle was partially rotten, and so definitely I would highly encourage, especially if you have a smaller GBA or Wetterlings, do put a lanyard on there for retrieval. This is something that I talked about back, especially with the Wetterlings, but I haven't mentioned in a while. But like I said, if you care about your axe or it's an important piece of your kit, do put a retrieval lanyard on it so that you don't lose them in the snow. Pretty much sums up expensive axes, GBAs, Wetterlings versus inexpensive cold steel trail boss, even fisters to a certain degree. Those axes just don't want to stay up. But hope you guys have enjoyed that. Don't forget to comment down below, leave your thoughts on what you think about inexpensive axes versus expensive. What do you guys run personally for your setup, and just let me know you guys' experience with different axes of hopefully the ranging price points. And don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, and I'm out.